Well, good evening and welcome back to Investigate Everything. I've taken a lot of time off. I'll apologize again. You guys must be used to it by now. There was a lot happening. Hopefully, you tuned into that live streaming I did for like 3 days of the LA riots, mostly peaceful riots, I might add. So today we have a special guest with us. He's a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army, where I come from, and we both enjoyed the Army's 250th birthday this past weekend, and we celebrated that both by paying homage to those who came before and after us and during our time in, and we also paid homage to that by investigating and collecting intelligence on those who seek to undermine the very fabric of this country and our way of life. So today we're going to talk about the NoKings movement. Now, that will change. It already has, as Bill is going to tell you. But why are we talking about it? It's been a week. It didn't really have much impact. Well, we're talking about it because you have to remember how Marxists work. And, ultimately, they keep, for them, a victory is gaining a yard every year. They're constantly moving the ball down the field. Now, that's why we're covering it, because we want you to really kind of ingest and keep and index the patterns, the logistics. Bill was a lieutenant colonel, so he was leading a lot more troops than I was and doing a lot more strategy, and he's going to talk about that. But I'm sure he will share with you. And we just met on X, by the way. True to my word, I will bring people on this show, even if they're not professional podcasters. I liked his analysis. It really, was a great job on his analysis and his collection. Great field photography work, by the way, I might add. And I wanted to bring him on because personally, I don't care if you have a massive platform. I don't care if you have 15 published books. I only care that you know what you're talking about. And we have a lot more of you coming on the show, so I'm looking forward to that. But when we look at this, when I look at anything, and I'm sure Bill will agree, the first thing I'm looking for is the structure. After I've done the collection, after I've sorted my intelligence, I'm looking for the structure, okay? I'm looking for the S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. We'll go into that in a second. But basically, the administration of something, the intelligence related to something, the operation and execution related to things, the logistics of things, very important. Especially important is the logistics. And by understanding those, you can recognize these movements in their early stages, because they're not always going to be well-advertised NoKings marches. They're not always going to have their mobile app. While these things are occurring, there is almost like a shadow-type movement behind them that comes out in a very violent way. And as I said many times, much like Odysseus in the Odyssey, they kind of ride underneath the sheep to trick us. So the sheep come in with their signs and their rubber chickens, as you saw in some of my footage. But then when the sun goes down, that's when the violence goes up. And you can't let your guard down. A lot of the stuff we post is funny. A lot of the stuff we post is a lot of geriatric, very old people. But you can't let your guard down because, again, that's almost like a smoke bomb that you throw ahead of you while your troops move in. And one of these times, and we've already seen this in LA, you're going to see it go ultra violent and maybe even on a nationwide level. And that's another column of war that you have to look at, especially with so much going on in the world. So I could ramble on. It's been a long couple of weeks, but I was in Brooklyn yesterday and I was checking out some of the damage there. But I'm happy to say that there's no signage up. People in the working class neighborhoods, especially Brooklyn, are not having it. In my own neighborhood in Brooklyn, which is mostly first and second generation islanders, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, they're all working class. They've been there for a long time. They don't want that in their neighborhood. And it's actually an area that's slowly turning purple, maybe even red someday. So it's a big deal. I was actually meeting with the president of the Republican Club down there for dinner to go over strategies on how we can keep moving the ball forward. And what I like about the way the people in the cities especially are looking at this, and a lot of the people in the rural neighborhoods, they're looking at the way the enemy fights, and they're adopting some of those practices, not the violent ones, not the illegal ones, but gaining that territory, playing that money ball, getting inch by inch so you can slowly take territory, because that's what it's all about. Just like in the military. But don't listen to me about this. Let's listen to our guest. I'm going to bring him to the stage. I'm welcoming Bill to the stage. He also has a great website that I will put up while he's talking called Locked In Leadership. I was kind of scrolling through that. He's got a hell of a career, but I'm going to let him tell you all about it. So without much further ado, I am bringing Bill to the stage, and here he is. Bill, welcome. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for your patience.
Brian, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So tell us about you, Bill, and why, and then we'll go right into the analysis, because I'm sure people are just dying to hear your analysis, especially. But if you could describe a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing. It's an impressive resume, but I don't want to undermine it by reading it off a screen. So please.
Well, I appreciate that. I was in the Army for 23 years before I retired. And so I was an armor officer, so that's tanks, the M1 Abrams tank, and moved up from platoon leader up through, retired as lieutenant colonel. And so I would kind of categorize my career in kind of leading troops at the platoon, company, battalion level in that way. And then about the halfway through, when you're a major, I went to Command and General Staff College and went to another Army school called the School of Advanced Military Studies, where they teach you to be an operational planner, to learn how to solve wicked problems and plan for general officers. And so immediately after that school, my first assignment after that was to be one of the operational planners for Lieutenant General Odierno during the surge in Iraq. So I was.
Can you explain what that is?
The surge?
No. What you just, yeah. And just bear in mind, a lot of people on this may have never been in the military.
Absolutely. And so the rankingest general at that time in Iraq was Lieutenant General Odierno. He operated out of Baghdad and a couple of Saddam Hussein's palaces there. So I was fortunate to be one of his operational planners to help him conceptualize problems and think of ways of attacking the various problems that he had, the problem sets. At that time, this was during the surge in Iraq when violence was off the charts in Iraq. Everyone's trying to figure out, how do we tamp out these fires that are going on, this violence. And so they called it the surge. I won't go into a lot of detail unless your viewers want details on it.
My viewers love detail. They're all investigators.
The problem set is now we are, and I'm just going to give my assessment, is we're an army of occupation now. And so the Iraqis, this is their nation. They're not appreciating us so much now. And there's sectarian conflict just going off the charts in Iraq. And in order for our military to continue to have a presence there, we had to keep cycling units through. And so you would have a train up, then you would deploy to Iraq for about a year, and then you go back to home station, and it's rinse and repeat. And there's only so many brigades in the Army to go through this rinse and repeat cycle. And so now when violence was just exploding in Iraq, the only solution that the higher level generals, the only solution set that they could think of was more boots on the ground. Well, now you pay Peter to pay Paul, and that means you're forwarding that cycle, which means you will have maximum troops on the ground for a short period of time. But when that's done, now those units that you pushed forward in the cycle, they're all back home. And so you're going to end up now with a paucity of troops in Iraq. And so this is what we were dealing with. And
Got it.
I was there with Lieutenant General Odierno trying to figure that out. And so
Gotcha.
I retired. My last job in the Army was being a professor, an assistant professor of tactics and operational art at the Command and General Staff College. And so this is what I did for then
Understood.
6 years.
Where what was the largest unit you ever led? And for those that don't know, Bill was a lieutenant colonel, so that's a commissioned officer. That is to about two ranks. That's two ranks away from general. So it's very high up. Were you in charge of a brigade?
And so I was a executive officer, the second in command of a squadron of about 750 troops, and that was my second tour in Iraq. 2 tours there. That was up in the Nineveh province, just to the west of Mosul, in 2008, 2009.
Gotcha. And how? What years were you in? Just out of curiosity.
And so I started
Roughly, you don't have to give away too much.
Yeah, 1993 until 2015.
Okay. 93. Oh, okay. So I was in from 92 to 2003. So we were definitely in at the same time.
We overlapped somewhere there, yeah.
Were you? Did you go to college first?
I went to Kent State University. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
In Ohio.
So, and for those that are unfamiliar with the military, you can become an officer in numerous different ways. You can go to college, and then I don't know what the program is, but you can seek. You get offered a commission, correct?
Yeah, this is ROTC. So I went to ROTC,
right,
and then was commissioned an armor officer.
And you can also, if you're enlisted like I was, you can choose to go something called green to gold, and you go to OCS, and you become an officer from an enlisted man. So I'm one of those guys, Bill, that never ever use the phrase "Don't call me sir" because I work for a living.
Yeah.
Because especially in armor infantry, these officers work, and they work hard, and they work longer hours than most of the troops, not to take away from the troops. So it's always good to meet another tactical person rather than someone that was riding a desk their whole career. Especially in armor, you guys are busy, especially in Iraq. Well, look, on that note, I've got it up on the screen, as you can see. You also have a website that I think is really interesting. It's called Locked In Leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on here?
Locked In Leadership is my attempt to kind of give back to the community, businesses, organizations that deal with younger folks that come into the workforce that just don't quite understand leadership. And I would argue none of us do starting off. It's discovery learning, and it's often pretty ugly, and sometimes folks never figure it out. And I felt that I've learned so much in the 23 years I was in the Army that I can help expedite and help young men and women not make typical mistakes that are made when you really don't have a mentor. You really don't have someone that can help you navigate the dangers and the pitfalls of trying to lead other folks. And there's very definite things that you want to avoid. And if you just knew in advance, it'd be so much easier. And so this is what I do at Locked In Leadership.
So you're more focused on like future managers or current managers that are just very young without any experience to get thrown into a position. And is that correct?
Absolutely. But I'm also available for mid-grade leaders and even higher level leaders that really want to hone their leadership skills. And so this is what I aim to do with Locked In Leadership. I'm also writing a book on this now. It's not out yet. And so
great. When's it coming out?
Yeah, soon. Don't know yet. Still in the throes of getting that complete.
It's interesting that what a great idea too. Like a lot of people try to mentor, they try to start businesses where they're encouraging young people going into the workforce. I like the idea of you training, junior managers how to lead, because I think that's such a force multiplier. You get one of them on the right path and they're going to end up mentoring those beneath them. I'm lucky enough where I was able to mentor my daughter, who's in her late 20s, in management, and she does a great job. and she's not even afraid to fire people. So that's necessary sometimes too. But so it's good that. But I'm one person, so you're going to be a megaphone. And when the book comes out, certainly let me know if I can amplify it. I'm definitely going to read it.
I appreciate
As
that.
I books like that, like on leadership especially, it's it's a perishable skill, especially if you're not currently leading anyone, and it's always good to get other perspectives or lock down the perspective you have.
And I don't
So
know if it's just a symptom of society today, but it just seems to me that a lot of younger folks have a little bit of a difficult time with awkward conversations or hard conversations when you
oh
have
right,
to
have you
even
noticed that it's
you have to
crazy.
look at someone in the eye and tell them, look, you're just not doing a good job. But you have to set the conditions for that conversation early on when you start leading them, when you bring that person on the team. If you don't set the conditions for that, then you can't have that conversation and be respected and be effective with that conversation later on when someone's not performing. And so that's really
Yeah.
not taught at the university. It's not taught.
Well, and I look, my theory on that is, and this kind of segues into our topic of the night. Um, we've seen this in coming out of a lot of colleges, and not just the Ivy Leagues, where this everyone's equal thing. There is no chain of command. And Zappos shoes tried this. I don't know if you recall this. They tried to do this like no chain of command type style, and they almost went bankrupt. Now, my wife, who comes from the far left, and she hasn't gone anywhere. I just want to make that clear. She just, she says, and many of others have said, her party left her. She doesn't even recognize it anymore. She still believes in the same thing she did, which was always civil liberties, sovereignty in this country, in the Constitution. But coming from that world, it was really interesting because when I met her, she had security issues. That's why she hired me. And so I just give direct commands like, okay, you need to do this, 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 this. And they, her and her friends would look at me aghast, like, who's he think he is? And it's like, we don't got time. Let's go. And when she started working with some people in podcasting and everything like that, and went to a couple conferences, and we went around the country since 2000 talking to people, she looked at me and she said, I really like you military folks. She goes, straight to the point and efficient. And she goes, why can't everyone do that? I said, everyone used to. So,
Well, after the military, I had a couple other jobs. I worked at a small university in Kansas as a chief development officer.
mm,
And then I worked for Amazon as an operations
really,
manager for over 3 years.
what was that
And
like?
well, it was very interesting. And that's what led to locked in leadership because I led lower level managers subordinate to me, so many of them fresh out of college. And they just did not have leadership skills. But
It's amazing.
they resonated so well when they had a leader and someone that invested in them and wanted their welfare, but could give them guidance and direction, something that Amazon didn't give them. They have all these leadership classes and things like this, but it's all garbage. It's not good. You need organic instruction. And one of my firm convictions is you cannot teach leadership through a book. Now I'm writing a
Mm,
book on leadership, but to really get to the essence of leadership, that helps you, it gets you close, but it's taught organically, one person at a time,
yeah.
molecule to molecule, eyeball to eyeball.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a magical thing. It's a magical thing between individuals. And so that,
Yeah, a good point. When
so
I'm going to use that as a convenient segue into what we're talking about. So we both were videotaping and getting right inside of these NoKings rallies, which I'm in Salem, Massachusetts currently. They were pretty tame here, I'm not going to lie. People were pretty nice. That's why I cropped out a lot of faces. They're ignorant, naive, but
right.
nice. But what I did notice, per what we're talking about, is just no messaging, no It was just utter confusion. They got them there. I know how they could do the signage. We'll talk about that, and you will too. But when I went around talking to people, and while you're talking, I'll spool up some things. So I'm listening to you, but I'll be spooling that up while you're talking. I went around asking people, like, what main message do you want to get out here? What do you want to do? No one could really answer that.
Yeah.
So they had the logistics down. They got people there. They all had the right signs, which they do through Mobilize. .us, but no one really had any talking points. So the key thing in that war, the key weapon, which is messaging, and they had no message. No kings and Trump is bad. People are numb to that. What was your experience? What did you see on the ground? And you were in Ohio, right?
Northeastern Ohio. And what I would just like to hit on what you just said about the messaging is if you went to the NoKings website, and they had a tab which was toolkit. And I did a recon, being an armor guy, a Cav scout, reconnaissance. I live by reconnaissance. And so I went to the website, read all of their materials. They actually had a toolkit. They had talking points. They had messaging that they encouraged their folks to, you can see it. It may not even be there anymore because now
I downloaded it all. Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
I downloaded it all too because they do erase them.
But messaging was all over the place. No cohesive message.
Well, and even here, like you read it, and this is what I noticed. It's like, what is NoKings? NoKings is a national day of action and mass mobilization in response to the increasing authoritarian excesses and corruption of the Trump and whoa. I did something similar to marketing. You might know it as propaganda, but that that is bad messaging right there. Right. What is NoKings? NoKings is a movement to, and stop me if I'm wrong, but NoKings is a movement to do this, this, and this.
It has to be short, succinct, something in just a few points. But even their toolkit, it just had too much. It was too wordy, too much. And so their mobilized frontline troops for this particular protest, they were all over the place. Even their messaging, their signs, I saw all manner of signs that had nothing to do with tyranny or monarchy or kings.
No, I know. Hopefully I could get my footage up because I dove right in and I was asking people. Actually, you know what? I'll pull this up in a sec, but I'm putting on the screen here. So this is what Bill's talking about. So it takes you, and by the way, for anyone who told me on X that Indivisible is not organizing this, I just want to point out that yes, they are. And for those that don't remember, Indivisible, which is led by a guy named Ezra Levine, who he's kind of changed his branding lately. He's trying to be like the left-wing Steve Bannon, so I guess he thinks that means wearing a bomber jacket. Never mind that, Steve Bannon is, got an MBA from Wharton and was a naval commander, but, that aside. But these are the signs. And as Bill was saying, and I agree, like, first of all, what does NoKings mean? It's like, what does that mean, NoKings? More than 60% of this country supports Donald Trump. They don't see him as a king or acting like a king. They see him as getting, things like this kind of wrapped up. But then also, to your point, like when you throw in like no thrones, no crowns, no kings,
or Medicaid.
Yeah, and then they throw in Medicaid. I have friends everywhere. Like, what does that mean? And I think, from my propaganda time and, as a lieutenant colonel, you dealt with at least the military's propaganda efforts. You want your sign to be able to stand alone and people know what it means. If the person with this sign, and I saw a few of them, they had T-shirts too. I have friends everywhere. If he walks away from the rally, that's just a quirky T-shirt.
Right.
So yeah, these are the things. And then when you see "We the People," you're thinking, okay, they must support Trump.
Well, and this is interesting because I think that they are, the Army said for many years we're a learning organization. So during the
Mm.
war in Iraq and Afghanistan, we're a learning organization. We always conduct after action reviews or AARs and try to adapt to the battlefield, adapt to the changing circumstances. And indivisible here, and I think what you have to understand, NoKings doesn't stand by itself. It's just one
Mm-hmm.
tentacle. It's one tentacle, but that ultimate globulous, indivisible planning head of this beast, they're learning, and what they're trying to do now is appropriate the patriotic symbolism. This is why you see the American
Yeah.
flag, where you see "We the People." They're trying to
Mm-hmm.
appropriate that to themselves to see if they can gain more support for the masses and from the masses. They saw that displaying Mexican flags, foreign flags, wearing keffiyehs, that really doesn't play well. And so now I think this was like a probing attack, if you will.
Mm.
And we could talk a little later what I think the aims were of the protests, because I think the aims actually were modest. I think the planners involved here, let's just call it the Hydra, or we can call it whatever we want to call it. We can call it
Mm-hmm.
indivisible. But I think their aims were very modest. It was a probing attack, which for your non-military viewers, it's a tentative attack to kind of sense the enemy, to kind of feel out the enemy, to see what's going on
Interesting.
out there. You're not committed. It's not a committed attack
Mm-hmm.
because they have an array of attacks or an array of protests that are planned. On 17 July, another one's coming up. I posted about this. It's called Good Trouble. And Good Trouble now taps into
Yeah.
the racial antipathy or the racial divide.
So they're
I'm
going back to that.
exactly, and I'm quite sure if I were a betting man, I'm not, but I would imagine there's probably going to be another protest as well that would
Right.
try to exploit the LGBTQ portion of the sentiment out there, and so they're trying all of these different attacks to see how they can energize a larger base. And so in this case, this is why you made the similar observations as I did, that it was mostly white, it was mostly
Mm-hmm.
older folks. I saw very few what I would call maybe productive fit men, maybe from 20 years old to say 45 or so, or maybe even let's say 50, just to make ourselves feel better. But I saw very, very few of them. I don't even recall that I saw one, but maybe if you slow rolled some of my video, maybe you could capture one or two, but really not. And so they
Well,
saw, and so when they have this great planning effort, then they go back and they did an AAR, they did an after action review. They had a post brief on that website that says I think it was called "What Did We Learn" or something like that, or the post
did
brief
you download it and capture it?
there a little late, a little earlier today. And so
Okay,
this
good.
and I'm kind of all over the map. I apologize for that, but this is one of their vulnerabilities. It's a necessary evil in today's information battlefield. But if you're going to try to mobilize the masses,
Mm-hmm.
you have to use open source media websites that we're going to be able to see as well. And
Right.
so we can see we can see what they're planning for the public facing events. We're not going to see the more sinister, nefarious plans that go hand in glove with us, that are in the shadows behind these events, which I'm convinced exist, and they have a
Now,
whole
would
array
you?
of those.
Sorry to interrupt you. So, from your perspective, I see it as like I'm fairly certain well, I know most of these people on the ground are unwitting, as they say. If violence happens, they're dumbfounded by it. And
Sure.
we saw this in Boston and New York with BLM. Like, they seem confused. And that was a tactic that even, the far extreme IRA used to use in Ireland. They would infiltrate peaceful protests, and then the whole protest gets labeled as IRA. So my question to you is, do you, at what point, like, how much knowledge, let's just talk about Indivisible, because obviously Ezra Levine is well funded, so he knows somebody. How much do you think he knows about what's going on? And this is Bill's opinion, so it's not trying to be libelous or anything. We're just kind of spitballing here, but I'd love to get your perspective on that.
This is my opinion, and I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to see data and change my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But as a planner, I always look for patterns, and I look for causation. I try to see causation behind it. I like to see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't so much believe in random events. Now, I believe coincidence can happen, perhaps, but I look to see, is there planning behind visual events that we're seeing, especially when the stakes are incredibly high and enormous sums of money are spent on things like this. When you look at the NoKings website, when you see the planning that was involved in the interactive map, and you can click on it in RSVP, and if you want to host an event, you click it and someone will contact you.
Mm-hmm.
Enormous amount of very good planning went into this.
They're very organized. Yes.
Very organized, which means they spent a lot of time preparing for this in advance. So then as a planner, I look back in time and I say, well, how many months would it take for them to get all of this put together? And where were we as a nation when they probably started putting this together? And when you see the amount of money that's involved, the conclusion that I come to is this is a well-planned, well-funded, multi-layered, larger strategic campaign. We're only seeing the public face of this, but there's much more going on underneath the water. There's much more going on behind the scenes or under the hood. And so when I went to capture video from this, what I'm really looking for is I'm just quietly on the periphery. I'm in the background because I know from my time in the military, don't look at the shiny object. I'm leaving the shiny object alone, and I'm really looking to the rear. I'm looking on the periphery. I'm looking on the flanks. I'm looking to see who's not up on the front lines, but's there monitoring and looking. Sure enough, in one of the events, when I went back to my vehicle to go around to hit it from another angle, I noticed an individual got in his vehicle too and followed me.
Really?
That was very interesting to me because I'm always on. And so then when I saw this vehicle, and okay, maybe I'm paranoid. So, I have to realize sometimes. So then I do some strange maneuvers and then I park, and that vehicle comes and parks very close to me and sits there, doesn't get out. They're looking at me. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, okay. So let's gotcha. Play around. So we did it a couple more times. Then I lost them on purpose. I got rid of them and then continued to film. So
did you do an SDR?
Yeah, absolutely. And
so for those that don't know, an SDR is a surveillance detection route. I actually did not learn that in the military. I learned that in the intelligence community. And if anyone ever wants to learn how to do one, they're very easy. But basically, you're doing a staircase type pattern to force the point is to detect surveillance. So if you got to go from point A to point B, you want to take, whether you're on foot or vehicle, a staircase like pattern, playing a route that way, where you're going right and you're going left. This allows you to look behind you by looking to the right and left. It also forces, if it's more than one person surveilling you, let's say it's a 3-person team, a 2-person team, it will allow you to know the size of the team, thus allowing you to figure out what entity type is surveilling you. So like a 3 or 4-person team, that's going to be either a well-funded cartel or the government. One car following you through all these turns, probably a lone player or someone who's not trained. We could go into that another time, but I'm glad you know that acronym, Bill.
And then, and of course, I got the license plate number just in case I needed it for the
Good.
future. But and,
Send it to me.
absolutely.
I can. I have access to the license plate reader databases.
Okay. And so, that now the cities that I were in, they were smaller, not necessarily. It's not like a big New York City, something like this.
Hmm.
This is, and you saw thousands of locations throughout the nation.
Right.
And so I wouldn't expect and didn't expect that there would be um, many or any of the higher level operators at these lower level events.
Hmm.
And what I would call a higher level operator, someone who is maybe higher on the food chain and has some other objectives and goals that they have planned for that protest. I think this was more organic.
And those people were on the ground. Did you see them?
No, I didn't see them at
Okay.
this because the two I went to, I don't think were big enough fish. They weren't big enough protests to warrant
Right.
higher level, let's just call them operatives if you want to call them that.
Mm.
But there was someone that followed me. Now, maybe this was just someone who was signed up for this protest and they're worried about MAGA, so they're being vigilant too. It could have been that. It could have been maybe nothing more than that. It didn't have to be someone on the payroll.
What's your impression? This is interesting because we're going to go through some of your videos now, and I've got some questions about them, what we're looking at. But I did notice some military-looking people at some of these protests on your videos, and maybe they're just people that went to the local surplus store. But I mean, they have that military build. You know what I mean? They don't look like the soy boys, the guys in your. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. We'll get to it, but.
Yeah.
Based on your instincts, based on your ability to recognize just from years in the military, it's just like being a cop for a long time or being, being in any subculture for a long time, you can recognize if someone's, say, for instance, at least uniform service, someone who's gone through some sort of boot camp and discipline training, who's worked as a cohesive unit. What's your impression of the driving style? Did you get a look at the person? I'm just not trying to identify them, but really just trying to think, what's your thoughts? Was it sloppy? Were they obvious? What do you think?
Somewhat sloppy. The individual that followed me, somewhat sloppy, tinted windows. Couldn't get a real good look at the person, but I could tell when he was looking at me. But again, I didn't see anyone that looked really well trained, that really knew what they were doing. I didn't see anyone like that. I saw folks who were maybe wannabes. When I look at Antifa, I don't see well trained military looking males in Antifa. I see folks who have stunted social skills, stunted social development, that have all kinds of anger and are trying to figure out how to vent that anger and then find a cause that will let them put their tabby boots on and their black ninja suits and masks and run around and do violence. This is what I see. I don't see, formidable, powerful looking actors.
Right.
They're jackals. If in the animal kingdom, this would be a jackal. And,
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
They're easily dispersed and they're easily defeated. But you get a bunch of jackals together, they can do a lot of damage. And so this is why you have to have strong police presence, strong law enforcement. But if law enforcement, if their hands are tied and they're reluctant, then the jackals, they plan and they think of many things that they can do to bring about the conditions of chaos, the impressions of instability and chaos. And so this is why we have problems in Seattle when this occurred.
Right. And see, well, keep in mind too, like on a different note, we're currently, I followed this lead, just a sidebar here. I followed this lead a while back back when actually Cuomo said you can't have more than a 6-person gathering. And of course, the first thing my wife did was throw a potluck for about 30 people. And, so I met some interesting people there, all in the freedom movement, but very smart woman who knows Seattle well, but she's also been involved in political campaigns, and she's a donor. She told me something that her competitive intelligence team discovered, because she invests in a lot of real estate. But that was it called ACAB, or what was that area that they blocked off from police in Seattle? As it turns out, that had grandfathered rent control and taxes.
Oh, wow.
And all of those things, that all the businesses that shut down because they were locked in that little zone have now been sold off to major real estate conglomerates. And so I do wonder sometimes in Seattle, if you notice, like even during these NoKings things, they were attacking high rises and really upscale businesses. And I do wonder if there's, and we could get to it on another show, I'm still researching, but for the audience out there who does like to investigate a lot of these leads, it'd be interesting to see the pattern of, okay, buildings attacked, buildings vandalized, where is there a sale down the line to a major conglomerate? Is it the same conglomerate? So I'd say just for Seattle, but for now, but that does seem to be a pattern in Seattle, because and possibly LA, because there are a couple immigrant like C shops ransacked and everything, but if you notice, they were primarily attacking, of course, the federal building, but there were a lot of like high-end businesses that were attacked. And so I do wonder, that could be, someone who makes money on a defaulted loan, someone who wants to get that real estate, someone who can't afford the real estate now wants to lower the prices so they can move their business in. And this isn't fantasy. Like, I have had, as a guy who owns a private detective business in the past, and I do private consulting for private intelligence, I have had people ask me if I do or provide those services.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so they see my resume and they see kind of like paramilitary and ex-special forces intelligence, and now I'm private, and they're like, hey, can you do something to make these people sell? Of course, I'm not going to do that, but it's interesting that there's that expectations there, which tells me that industry exists.
Right. That's very interesting, but also discouraging.
It is, and that's a topic I bring up all the time when a lot of people are saying, "Oh, that's CIA. It's got a CIA footprint." I'm like, don't forget that at one point during the War on Terror, there were so many top secret clearances in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area where I lived, that it was one top secret clearance for every 2.5 people in that tri-state area.
Unbelievable.
And when the people like me get out of that community, I was able to, kind of get into competitive intelligence, kind of like morph that way. But there's a lot of people, they don't know what to do. They get out, they've been doing this for a lot longer than I was, and they get hired by law firms. And then next thing you know, they're working for a cartel, but they don't realize they're working for a cartel until they're deep in it. I'm sorry to go off the path there, but speaking of path, really quick, Bill, sorry to do this while you're on screen. I do want to mention my sponsor. And Bill, I'm actually pretty impressed. This might sound awkward, but you've kept yourself in great shape, man. And it's like, for me, I do my best, but I add collagen to every diet. This is Native Path. This is our sponsor. Go to getnativepath.com/Daily Clout. And I take collagen now every day. I'm 51. And I had a lot of aches and pains, and things were starting to, I felt like the Tin Man once I hit 48. And once I was lucky, Native Path sent me a bunch of collagen, but I started taking it. I never even heard of it. And it's awesome. Like, it's great.
That's not part of my nutritional regime, but do you recommend that? I mean, did you really notice?
Totally.
Incredible benefits.
I mean, I have over 200 parachute jumps from when I was in, and so I don't have great knees, and I've had knee surgeries, and I've got cartilage issues in my shoulders, and just little things like your skin tone, your nails, your teeth, and I didn't notice it when I was taking it. Naomi and I and everyone at Daily Clout, we started taking this when they sent it to us, and it's just like one scoop. You could put it in coffee. You don't even, it has no taste, no smell, and it just, you can see here, it's just, And apparently, I had a doctor on. He used to be an LA Rams guy and everything. And he's been a sports doctor, so he dealt with joints and stuff that soldiers deal with. And I asked him, I said, is collagen important? And, in your typical top doctor condescending way, and he's a friend, he's like, yeah. He's like, it's like the mortar in a house. Like, you constantly have to be resealing and adding. And I guess your body stops making collagen or producing collagen at 28. So yeah, I'd recommend it for sure. And I'll see if Get Native Path will send you some.
I'm going to give it a try for sure because, as you said, I'm also in my 50s, and you feel the mileage after a while. And
you do feel the mileage.
You never give in to the mileage. It's like, no, the hammer must come down.
Yeah.
But you do pay a little bit of a price for that.
Well, and I didn't really notice the effects until I went on a cruise for, do you know who Mark Stein is?
No.
From GB News guy.
Okay.
He's a victim of the Ofcom censorship over in the UK, but he does this thing called Stein at Sea. So he invited Naomi to be a speaker, and I'm the luckiest +1 in the world. Let me just put it that way. And I forgot my collagen, and so it's like an 8-day cruise with none of my, and that's when I noticed it. Like, I was really sore a lot, and I'm on a cruise. And we were in VIP accommodations, and I was sore. I couldn't really sleep well, and as soon as I got back, like I pounded that collagen, and it just brings me back to life. And even my son, who's in football, he's like 13, and his cousin who has knee issues from playing basketball, all in the same age, they take collagen, and they actually heal faster.
Wow.
Yeah,
no,
it's amazing. So sorry to plug my sponsor while you're on. That's kind of rude, but it was a good segue, so I hope you don't mind. But it is worth it. Everyone should get it. And Bill, I'll see if I could get you some. And if you do, certainly let me know. It's great.
I'll circle back and let you know. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about your videos. And if we have time, I'm going to do your videos first. Then if we have time, we'll go through mine so we can see some comparisons. So this is the first one you sent me. These, and everyone bear with me, these are on my Twitter message, so I didn't have time to download them. But all right, so here it looks like you're in a parking lot.
Yeah, I pull up to the rear of it because I always just approach from the rear, kind of gauge the battlefield, see what's going on. Interestingly, what you'll notice too is most of these protests throughout the nation were only a couple hours in duration. They were only scheduled for
Right, I did notice that.
And so what that indicated to me was, I could be wrong, but my assessment was, again, this is just a probing attack. If this was meant to have more lasting objectives, you think that they would, number one, they'd be scheduled a bit longer. Number two, they'd be scheduled closer to darkness, like just before nightfall,
right,
or maybe from 1500 hours, like 3 p.m. until maybe 7 p.m. But most of them, it seems like they started around 11 a.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m., and were over, and it was still quite light. And so that really doesn't give much of an occasion for, let's just say, nefarious actors to do things when it's still light out and it's in the middle of the day. And so that's by intention. So I think that this is just a attack. Now this here, I think that's a soy boy. That's just me personally, seeing from the rear. That person to me does not look fit and fit to fight. It looks like someone who, I don't know what. Maybe he's doing Black Ops or what's the latest video game, and thought, man, I can get in on this.
Oh no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. But he looks like, here's what, I kind of think he may have spent some time in the military, and here's why I think so, or some uniform service. Because what I noticed was the square shoulders and the posture. So he's not doing text neck. It looks like, an American flag here, I can't be sure. I think he might be a medic, because EMS up here. And then the haircut. He's got that tapered thing going on. But, again, it's also if you go to the West Village, you go to my former fabulous barber, you're going to get a taper as well. Or if you get a Dominican barber or a Russian barber, you're going to get a taper as well. But it would make sense if he was like, if he's a emergency medical guy, that I think it makes sense. So and earlier when we talked, I didn't notice his hat, and I think it says EMT or something like that. But you're right, he might just be a soy boy, but who knows? But it did stand out at me, and really just the posture really struck me because we all fall on lazy times even after the military. So but one thing that really stands out, and you mentioned this in another tweet, which I thought was great, that you did the demographics, and if I could pull that tweet up, I will. Tell us about the demographics you saw, and you can kind of see them here.
The demographics were largely white. I would say probably 80% white, 90%. I think 90% is not an over exaggeration. Very few Black Americans, like very few, like single digits in both of them combined.
And are there a lot of Black Americans in that area normally, just in general? Okay.
Absolutely. And so that was a glaring absence demographically. And then the women, women to men ratio was approximately, just eyeballing it, 3-1. I didn't go through each of my videos, and I didn't do any, detailed demographic work there by the numbers. So it's just my impression, 3-1. And it seemed like the older women to the younger women was maybe 5-1.
Really?
There were younger women there. But then the other interesting thing is it seemed like one of the intents was to make this a festive atmosphere.
Totally.
And so, and you even see in the toolkit, they talked about smiling, being polite, being happy, smiling at people. And so in that regard, what that does is it brings what I call incidental participants. When you have a festive kind of event occurring in your neighborhood, it will draw more people. They'll call up their friends on the phone. Hey, come down here. This is kind of fun. So you continue to see folks without signs, no preparation, just joining the festive atmosphere.
Right.
And that swelled the numbers to a degree.
I want to point something out here. So this, honestly, I can't tell the difference between yours and Salem, Massachusetts, and it was the same thing. It was like, well, we used to joke when I was in D.C. back before things got really serious, but my buddy Dave, and he's in the federal, it's that police force that's like federal, and they have no boundaries, and I think Federal Protective Service. But we used to go down to the like anti-Iraq rallies in D.C., and he said the funniest thing to me one day. He said, dude, I hate these things. It's always like bring your own sign day.
Yeah.
Because it's like Palestine, LGBTQ, and it's just nothing's changed. But I did notice, see this one down here, I forgot what that said. It was like no FAUX, but I forgot how it ended. I did see that in Salem, the same exact sign.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll show you my videos in a second here. But you're right, the festive atmosphere, and if you're not clued into these things, like, because what's weird, now I don't know about Ohio, I noticed the local media in Boston really didn't cover these.
And I'd have to say, I really don't watch mainstream media here, local media. I just really don't. So I don't have a good feel if they covered it in Ohio or not, or to what degree they did.
Definitely for the next one, I watch it to get the messaging. And that's why I watch it. And someone got on me when I was live streaming the riots in LA from KCAL, local LA CBS, and someone got on me, and it's a largely conservative audience here in Rumble, and they said, dude, really, CBS, come on, man, I'm out. And I'm like, I'm not going to learn anything from Real America's Voice about the enemy, except what I already know. Great programs, we're on it, and I'm going to learn messaging from here. And another good source that I told the audience last time is definitely get a Blue Sky account. Because Have you heard of Blue Sky?
Yeah.
Yeah, Blue Sky, literally, I'll put it this way: has it ever bothered you when soldiers will get on a plane or in a train and they're talking classified stuff as if they're in a skiff? And that's what Blue Sky is like. They're saying all sorts of things they probably shouldn't be saying. And so I just set up an account so I could just read them. I don't really participate there. I'll put up cats and dogs and cute puppies and stuff, and that keeps an audience and keeps the guard down. But that's largely it. So okay, so now here this looks like some sort of main street. What was that?
It is. That's right there, Kent State. Of Kent State,
Okay.
the Vietnam War, 4 dead in Ohio. And so they have a pretty famous history of protests, but it was so flaccid here. There was not that big of a crowd, and you can see it was an older
Right.
crowd. And to their credit, now they didn't block traffic, and neither of the protests did anyone block traffic. They weren't rude. They weren't throwing things. They weren't being nasty. They really did keep it festive, happy, loud, shouting their slogans. But at no time did it seem mean-spirited. And I think that this is
Never.
probably a function of the age of the folks. Maybe that was part of it. And so it's so important to understand what are the organizers trying to do with these. And I think that this is a probing attack to see how much of a mobilization can they get, which of the themes of their protests are more popular than others, which will draw a bigger mobilized crowd than others. How is law enforcement going to react to these protests? So they're learning from all of this, because I think that they have a multi-phased strategy that we're going to see emerge. And they're learning from all of this, and they have building objectives to flesh out their database for a refined strategy for the much bigger, more dangerous events in the future. And so
I
I think
agree with that, and I would add: is it possible? Or let me ask you this: is it also possible that, these seem like the kind of people that watch the polls, and at the management level, they seem like the kind of people that are, doing some customer research, they're doing some media research to see the reaction. Is it possible that the LA riots, which were, by the way, those protests underneath those riots were organized by the same people at Indivisible. Right. Is it possible that they said, "Hey, we gotta tone this down now, or they're gonna shut us down. No one's gonna come out to these things."
So I wouldn't be inclined to go with that right now. I think that these were specifically designed as they were. I think that the LA riot, they were trying to get their George Floyd martyr in preparation for these protests, and they failed.
That's interesting.
They didn't get a Jorge Floyd martyr. And I could be wrong. This could be just wild speculation, but I always wonder, and I'm trying to get inside the mental crankcase of the enemy to see what they're thinking. And so in LA, yes, protests, they were violent, amped up, trying to get overreaction from the security forces, from the police, from National Guard, etc. But they didn't get it. Because if they had a martyr, I think they would have tried to use that to galvanize future audiences or future protests groups in the planned protests. If they had, coming up 17 July, good trouble. Now, this is going to exploit the racial spirit of things. If they had a martyr in the can ready to go, then maybe 17 July would be much, more dangerous. Right now, they still don't have a martyr. And so
I feel like they were trying to get one, or just like, not like, hey dude, go be a martyr. It was almost like the vibe that they put out there in LA. People were doing stupid things. Like, I saw a guy grab the barrel of a gun. That's a sure way to get shot normally. And you see this crazy girl like throwing herself on the van saying, "Let my people go."
Right.
Yeah.
But this is the when you look at guerrilla tactics, And, Lenin coined the phrase, what's attributed to him, I don't know that we know it for sure, but useful idiots. And it's not a pejorative term, but he actually meant useful in that you get Western sympathizers that help advance the objectives of the Soviet Union, but they're idiots because they haven't done their own research. They really don't understand that they're being used. And so part of the tactics here, and in LA, they want a martyr, but they're not actively, specifically giving marching orders to develop a martyr. Because if you get a big enough crowd and you can get the temperature and the emotions, you can get everything
Right.
up, then odds are maybe eventually, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, a police officer will lose his cool and shoot someone. Or National Guard now, they may butt stroke somebody, and there you have your murder. So, but they have to have plausible deniability because they're getting smart. And so throughout NoKings website, the Good Trouble website, they say in there, no violence, keep it peaceful. I appreciate that, but that's to have deniability, to be able to say that wasn't us, that was you. And this is where we have to be wise in these things. Starve it of oxygen. Don't go to these events. Maybe me and you, we have specific.
That brings me to another thing that you posted. Sorry to cut you off, but I don't want to lose it because you actually mentioned something that I just mentioned on my last episode, and you had mentioned the mini manual of the Urban Guerrilla by Carlos Marighella, a Brazilian political guy in the 70s and also a terrorist for the most part, or a terrorist mastermind. Why don't you tell the audience about that? I remember, like honestly, like every time I bring up mini manual, and I brought up on a space the other day, I said, guys, look, this is the same playbook that's been going on for years. But tell everyone about mini manual, because I think it is probably one of the most important books anyone can read, even before they understand communism or Marxism or socialism, which, it can get a little murky for people who are new to it. But the mini manual, it was written for people who are not that smart. So if people are not that versed in communism and Marxist movements, they'll still get it. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and why you chose to put up that post?
I think the importance of, and so after 9/11, I just had occasion in the Army. I started digging deep and just researching a lot counterterrorism or insurgency, counterinsurgency, etc. And so I read a lot of works of insurgents and then the counterinsurgent literature to try to understand how I might be of better value and use as a planner in Iraq. And so I came across Carlos Marighella. He fought against the Brazilian military dictatorship from 1964 to 1985. He wrote this mini manual. The important thing about him, unlike Che Guevara, Che thought that the insurgency should be in the rural areas, that was the key to victory. And Marighella said, no, it's not the urban areas. You do it it's not the rural, you do it in the urban areas. And so when you see these riots happening in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, now the brain trust of Indivisible and NoKings, the tentacles, they may not have read Marighella, and yet they may have, because it is the urban areas. Urban areas, it even speaks to why certain sectors of our leadership might be trying to move people to the urban areas. And when you dispossess people and homeless, and you get masses of people in the urban areas, now you have a mass movement. Just add the right water, and you have an instant mass protest. And this is straight from the mini manual.
Yeah. Let me tell you something, Bill. You just totally hit on something that I was just talking about at the Republican Club the other night. So in Brooklyn, it's a gentrifying area. So there's a lot of working class, a lot of poor people there too. Like right on our street, it's still a significant amount of crime. And I'll tell a story at the end so we can end on a dark but light note. But what I noticed when we got to, so we bought a place in the Bronx right before the pandemic. We were down in the very, nice Fifth Avenue area, but we broke that up into property, and so we bought a future rental in the Bronx.
Okay.
And the first thing I noticed was, so the West Village, which would be called downtown, and
Okay.
so not you know New York, but like for those that don't know, downtown is like the southern part, midtown the middle part, uptown the northern part of Manhattan. So we were downtown, like Greenwich and 10th, and it was lots of food, lots of newspaper, lots of books, lots of things like that. But in the Bronx, I couldn't find any bookstores. I couldn't find newspapers. It was a bit of a food desert, and this is up in Mott Haven. And then in Brooklyn now, I honestly, like, the only newspaper I can find for like 8 blocks, unless I go to like a Walgreens, and they're usually sold out. But like, New York is known for the newsstand, and the papers are out on the street and everything. The only things I can find are Chinese language newspapers and things like the Black Democrat and the Democratic Black Press, and it's a predominantly black neighborhood we're in. But for 8 blocks, I cannot find a newspaper except maybe CVS or Walgreens if I go early enough to get one. Okay. And we're talking like the corner shop that always has at least the New York Post or the classifieds. Nothing. There's no information. So I think you're right. Where like everyone in the city, they really are very unaware of not only what's going on. They see it on the news, but they have one stream of news. Because if you go to the hotels, if you've traveled around the country, go to the hotel, what are they playing? They're playing CNN. What is the free newspaper? USA Today. And then if you go to the airport, what are they playing? They're playing CNN. So people, but in that area, it's like, it's not that they don't know, and it's not that they're not smart, because they're, I have found that people who can get up in the morning, set up a stand of jewelry, and make money and live in such an expensive area, they're doing something right. And they can read the room really well. But they don't have access to the information, and they're not going to travel around to find the access unless they have a reason. Because if you don't know something's happening, why would you investigate it? So sure. I think you're right. It creates a lot of people on top of each other, but also when you take away the knowledge, and then someone comes in and they're like, "Oh my God, this is happening," they're going to get pissed off, and they're going to say, "This is happening. It's going to affect your neighborhood." And because most of the neighborhoods in these older cities, they want to be left alone. So they've branded, like President Trump leading up to the last election, they branded him as he's going to come in here and change things. When they're actually the ones doing that, So I think you make a good point with that. But go on, other observations.
And so, Marigela. So this is just an old book here, Bart O'Neill. You've probably seen it, Insurgency and Terrorism. Mm-hmm. And so, it just speaks to the mini manual, some of the key points in there about urban warfare, urban insurgency. And so I remembered that, went back to this, and this is where I would just also advocate for very important to have hard copy books. I spend not a little amount of money buying hard copy books, because what we find, and it speaks to your urban point, is that knowledge of the past, history, it's lost nowadays. And what you see on the internet, or even Grok telling you, etc., you get to a point where you really don't know what's happened before. But if we have hard copy books that deal with insurgency, that deal with history, that deal with economics, etc., we can know what occurred in the past. We can then anticipate and understand trends, and we're not subjected to very curated information silos. Now, we may have X and be able to talk freely, but if we don't have the raw material, the concepts to debate and discuss, because we go to Wikipedia, we go to curated websites that may be censored, and certainly younger generations and what they're taught, they just don't have this massive information that we need to
They
know.
don't. And,
And so,
I think, I don't know if a study's been done on this, but I almost feel like I retain things better when I read it from an actual physical book.
yes. And to me, books are tools. They're not holy. I take highlighters, I write all over them. In the back, I have my own table of contents and important
Mm,
concepts I want to remember from the book. And so every book I do that. And then I have Word documents where I have certain concepts that are very important to me and what book to find them in. And so,
that
books
is
are,
amazing. That's you should teach that course too, because like I think I try to tell people when they're collect. So a lot of this audience, they're out there and they're investigating, and a lot of them will get a lot of information, but they don't know how to sort it. And I try to teach from the Intel training I got how to sort, how to triage. But that's really important what you just said, because books are tools. I like that.
absolutely. And then, to get that into your brain and to really think about it, I often then will I have journals, a lot of hard copy journals, or I'll even do it on, Word. But in my own words, write down what was this guy, what was the concept here? What is he trying to talk about? How does that
Oh,
relate to what I read here? And I try to synthesize thoughts to pull it all together. And if you force yourself to do that, you come up with insights, and you're like, wow, I wouldn't have come up with that insight had I just read about it on Breitbart or on, pick any site you want to go to. Because there's
right.
something about the printed word and touching it with your fingers and highlighting it and then wrestling with yourself and trying to really synopsize, if I could make a term there, what did that mean? What's the so what of that? What's the implication for that? Does that have a bearing on what I'm seeing right now with these protests? Is there a common thread? Because, and everyone has
It's
heard this
really
before,
amazing.
history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. You hear it so
Say
much,
that again. Say that again.
history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes a lot. We hear this so much, we don't even
Right.
like to hear it anymore. It's just so pedestrian, but it's so true because human nature does not change. This is my opinion.
Mm.
I think it's a fact, but this is my opinion. I'm willing to just say it's an opinion.
I think you're right. I think you're
But if
right.
human if human nature doesn't change, then logically we might expect that the macro trends of human interactions, the macro trends of history, will keep repeating in very similar ways. Therefore, we don't have to be like a dear little baby Bambi walking out of the woods being surprised by what's happening in Los Angeles, by what's happening here. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I've seen this before. I recognize this. I understand the larger movement. And it's a fool's errand to say that this is exactly like that analogical thinking that got us in trouble in Iraq and Afghanistan, I would argue. But the analogies are useful to at least get your mind in the zip code, to get you
I
oriented
love
to
that.
a similar battlefield. And don't think it's exactly the same, because guess what? Iraq was not like the British in Malaya, although that was the
Hmm.
poster child for this is how you do it. It's like, absolutely not. There's so many differences with Malaya and the British in Malaya
Yeah. Yeah.
than Iraq would ever be. And the differences are so stark, it will never convey. And I get kind of animated with that. So,
No, keep going, man. This is fast. I mean, I love hearing this. This is great. Keep
and
going,
so,
please.
and so for that reason, I was very disillusioned when I was in Iraq. And the second time I was there, I'm like, okay, I'm cutting sling load on this because this is not achieving the objectives for which.
Wait, hold on. People, if sling load is an air assault term where you're hooking a giant vehicle to a giant Chinook helicopter and you cut the sling load when you're dropping it off, or it's too heavy or the thing's going to crash, just so you got the terminology. Go on, Bill.
Yeah, and so just pretty disillusioned with what I saw there. Many, many men and women, great folks doing wonderful things, treating Iraqis. I never went to the Afghanistan theater, but treating Iraqis with respect, dignity, sacrificially, you know,
Mm,
but then others who weren't doing that. And in the main, if we're there and spending so many years there and so much of our blood and treasure, there has to be a larger, demonstrable purpose,
Yeah,
and we have to be showing progress. And in my opinion, we absolutely were not doing that.
I
And
agree.
so I bring all of those lessons from my time in Iraq and planning for it and really wanting the best for the Iraqi people and wanting to develop
Hmm.
plans that maybe General Odierno would say, no, this is good, this makes sense. Um, and then just being very disillusioned, not in an angry way, but just realizing that,
I know
okay,
what you're talking about. No, you were in Iraq really quickly. So you were in Iraq after 9/11, right?
I was there
Yeah. So
twice.
I was in the Philippines down there with those Abu Sayyaf people, um, and with First Group, and I just want to cut it and say, it reminded me of something that's happening right now when you say it rhymes. And what I see is, so I don't know if you've been following this back and forth between influencers about Israel and Iran,
Sure.
but like Tucker Carlson is getting vilified and called an anti-Semite because Ted Cruz, and all due respect to his office, is just not as smart as Tucker Carlson. Let's just say it like it is. And if you watch that interview, Tucker Carlson never said anything anti-Semitic. Really, his message is, why are we even, he gets the, supplying and everything. He made the point like, okay, Ted Cruz, if you're saying, they had a plot to assassinate Donald Trump, then attack them now.
Right.
And then Steve Bannon went on, because I was catching up on it because I was so down, and I was actually got distracted by the Minnesota murders.
Sure.
Because actually the thing I like investigating the most is murder cases. But I got I had to catch up with this. So I'm like, wait a minute, why is Donald Trump doing this? And then I found myself, I had to take a pause, and I did what you do because I carry a journal everywhere I go, and I'm like, I wrote down, why do I feel this way? Why did my mind go to judging Donald Trump before I did any research? What influenced me? And I realized it was X. Like,
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people saying Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. He's just he's betraying his core values and all this. So I was like, okay, time out. And then when Steve Bannon was on Tucker Carlson the next day, which I thought was a brilliant move by Tucker Carlson, they're both saying the same thing. They're like, whoa, pump the brakes, slow down. And because Steve Bannon made a good point, he said, one thing about the greatest generation and going into World War II, there was a lot of planning, a lot of risk assessment, and there was a clear understanding of risk and reward and logistics and acceptable losses. And you don't just run into a war with Iran. The land alone will kill half the soldiers who aren't used to it. It's horrible. And so what I found was that the messaging that's coming from, and I hate to say it, but like a lot of conservative influencers, it just reminded me of the Dixie Chicks, who
Right.
really never said anything bad. They said, "Hey, wait a minute, like, why do we gotta? What does Iraq actually have to do with 9/11?" Which we know in hindsight, if you followed the curveball
Sure.
German asset, which is an ironic pseudo for an asset we launched a whole war on. I mean, there never were weapons of mass destruction found.
Well,
There never.
my first tour there was an operational planner for the ranking as general, Lieutenant General Odierno. And one of
Mm,
my personal science fair projects for myself is to confirm or deny, are there weapons of mass destruction here? And so during that entire time I was there, this is one of the things I kept asking people, looking, trying to talk with other individuals,
uh,
special operators that are there. Um, and I came away from that realizing there's nothing here. There's nothing here. And so that caused me to really just start questioning everything. I love the title of your show, Investigate Everything, because
thank you.
what I say repeatedly is challenge everything. Challenge everything. And
You have to.
you have to. And like, if you don't follow the party line, then you're called a traitor. And
Right.
this is whenever I hear that kind of thinking, I know what I'm dealing with now. I know that there's no thinking going on here. And so just to go a little.
Yeah, and you're right though. And it's like, so, I remember, so for those that don't know, the Dixie Chicks country band is a trio of women. I actually like their music. I was my first wife was like rodeo and all that, so like they were out there in the eastern side of the Sierras. My daughter was raised with like 400 head of cattle in the backyard. So, um, and I remember seeing that back then, but I was in the military and I was about to jump out of an airplane on 9/11. I'm like, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's like I didn't want to go to war for any other reason except that I hadn't done more than a few skirmishes with special forces. I wanted the adventure, and it's like I like the fear, I like the edginess. Call me shallow, but it's like, and I always explain to people like, you know, soldiers might join for patriotic reasons, but once you're in, you're doing a job. You're doing it for, yes, you want your men to come home, your women to come home, your buddies to come home, but I try to explain to people, most people, at least in the enlisted ranks, they're pretty apolitical.
Right. Agreed.
Would you agree with that?
100% agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so.
And I never even found race was a big problem when I was in. We used to have a saying from my drill sergeants back in '92, and they'd say, someone brought up
Yep.
proud Browns or something. That's so the Hispanic guys would call themselves. And there are three groups. There are the white guys, the black guys, and the brown guys. And they called themselves proud Browns in basic training. And one of my buddy Barajas, he's like, yeah, we're the proud Browns, drill sergeant. And he's like, and the drill sergeant got in his face, and he's like, the only color you are is green.
Green, yeah. Now, 23 years in the Army and never had any issues with race in any way, shape, or form. And that's not an exaggeration. It didn't exist in my experience. Maybe others had a different experience. Not mine.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Like, you were instantly out. Like, what I found was, and even though I was military intelligence, I was in the 101st, so I was always tactical, except for like one brief strategic assignment. But I was with the 101st, I was with 5th Group, I was with 1st Group. You're out. Like, race, boom, gone. Like, they quicker than you can blink. And so, anyways, I don't know how we got on that, but oh yeah, Dixie Chicks. So I went back and looked at their comments during Desert Storm, and they didn't really. I'm sorry, this was during Desert Storm. I apologize. That was early, but they were vilified, and they weren't really saying anything that bad. But if you recall, shit. Now I'm confused. Was it Desert Storm or was it Enduring Freedom?
It was not Desert Storm.
Yeah, it's Enduring Freedom, right?
Right.
But they were vilified, and if you remember back then, George W. Bush, you did not say anything against the Iraqi war. You just didn't. And even Doonesbury, which is obviously, very liberal, they had a great comic strip where it said, Mr. President, but so far no weapons of mass destruction have been found. How do you answer that? Is it possible that you just want to invade Iraq because you're mad that they tried to kill your dad? And then the next frame shows not President Bush. It shows a guy at a podium with an American flag over his head. And he's like, shut up. And then the reporter goes, sorry. And that was it. And that was the tempo back then. And I got it. Like, they were riding on the emotions, and we did get attacked. But it had nothing to do with Iraq, Right. And I feel like what's going on with Israel and Iran right now, because we're not going to get into that right now, but it's like, it's not so much that Israel is bombing a nuclear facility. They've done it before a few times. Is never a big deal. Like, okay, good, they're going to go do the spring cleaning for us. It's like taking out a wasp nest in upstate New York. And as you know, they've done this a few times. Of course, they changed the tempo. And I do feel like Bibi Netanyahu kind of put Trump in a really tough position by moving the way he did. But that aside, what I'm really upset about is, as you said, this polarization of patriots saying you're not a patriot, you're against Donald Trump if you don't blindly support something a foreign government is doing. And I'm glad that Donald. Go ahead. Yeah, I want your thoughts on this.
In the war of the American Revolution, and I can't recall which individual said this. It may have even been Patrick Henry. I may be wrong, but he said that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel, because that term is used to vilify people that are just trying to challenge things to make sure that we're on the moral high ground, that we're doing things properly.
Right.
And so identity politics, just you're with us or you're with the terrorists, as Bush famously said.
Yeah.
It's this binary. And as soon as I hear the binary come out, either this or that, well, this is now we're not really worried about thinking.
Well, and it also like, having been, in the swamp myself, of course I was, as I always say, I was a Morlock, from the time machine. I was underground. My wife was an Eloi. She was above ground. But the thing is, it's like when I see such a message like that, well, look, one thing, if you know DC politics, and you were a lieutenant colonel, so you probably do.
I was at the Pentagon for a number of years.
Oh, you definitely do. I hear that's the worst place in the world to work. I had a buddy who's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, grew up with him, and he said, I was so happy to leave the Pentagon.
I was there for 18 months, is essentially an XO for a 3-star. And he was in the running to be the G3 of the Army. And,
wow.
and he told me, hey, if I get this, you're staying. I'm like, oh, Lord. He didn't get it, and he said, okay, you're free. But I had to retire him. I had to preside, make sure he retired.
Right.
And then I was cut loose, and I went to Fort Leavenworth. But, yeah, I
hear the Pentagon is just a political nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble, so I won't make you say too much. But, like, yeah, even though you're out now, I get it. But that's what my buddy said. Like, he just felt like he always, and he was a well-decorated pilot turned lieutenant colonel, and he was doing well. And he just felt like he had a target on his back the whole time he was at the Pentagon.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, and that's, so anyways, so the swamp, obviously you were there. And by the way, I used to have an office right in Old Town, and I used to drive. Yep, I had a PI office with a gaslight lamp outside, just off of King Street, and so it's perfect. Yeah, it was like the perfect private detective office, and I used to live near the zoo in the Kennedy Warren. Yep. And so I got to. That was a beautiful drive every night past the Pentagon, over the bridge, and I love that. But anyways,
so
what's that?
Your drive. I lived in Fairfax.
Oh yeah. So you used to have to get on 66 at a certain time, or you get a ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah. But what I do know about the swamp is that when all of a sudden, normally logical, well-sourced people, influencers, I'm not going to name names, I'm a little disappointed at a few of them, that's when you realize they're getting paid by a certain pack. When they suspend logic and they start yelling kind of stupidly things that are similar to yelling "No Kings, No Thrones," except with a Republican flavor, or a pro-Israeli flavor, or an anti-Israeli flavor. Sure. And so I have a buddy who's a donor. He's old blue blood, old money, DC. He's a great source, and he's a great source because he's on the golf course.
Okay.
He's not a worker or anything like that, and he told me, he's like, look, DC, here's the camps, dude. He's like, there's the Qatari camp, the Turkey camp, the China camp, the Israeli camp, and the defense camp, And he said, and the Chevron camp. And he said, that's it. And he said, so if you're not getting, and he said, every billionaire, left or right, they have a pet influencer. You could see who people are with at, for instance, CPAC.
Yeah.
Who they're hanging out with. That's every billionaire is a pet influencer. And he said, and the thing is, if you're not all in on the issues of one of those clubs I mentioned, you will never hit 2 million followers. You will never get the big money for your podcast. And he said, if you want to figure out who's influence, who's taking money, he said, look at the podcasts that before the election were like you and I, you're in your house, I'm in my makeshift studio. And he said, and then watch how quickly the quality of their podcasts went up after the election. He said they got hired. And I think he's right. And he would know. I mean, he's of that class where they tell each other everything because they would never think he would tell me. And that's what I tell people to watch out for. But the other thing, and tell me if you notice this, Bill, with this Israel thing, I know we went off NoKings, and we got to end soon, I know, but and definitely I want to have you back on because you took the conversation to a great place with the way you read books. I think is incredible. But the other thing was what I noticed right away with the Israel-Iran thing is all of a sudden MSNBC, ABC, CNN all started calling him President Trump.
That's so strange.
Did you notice it?
Yes. Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're saying things like, MSNBC, they're like, he did his best. He tried so hard to bring him to the table. And now we got to go to war, So what did you notice?
Well, because that now aligns, and you have to ask yourself, what is it that he did recently that would be the cause of that change? And if mainstream media is even slightly warming up to him or currying to him slightly, slightest way, why would that be? And, I tell you, war is it's the worst thing ever. I'm not naive. I'm not an isolationist. I hate that term. I think it's a pejorative term just to stymie conversation because it puts you in a box.
Totally.
But war has to be the very last resort. And maybe for another time that we might talk, I'm a military planner. I believe in a very powerful military. But the problem is that's a two-edged sword. Because if you build it, it will be used. There's no such thing as building something incredibly powerful that is not used. The temptation is too great. And so in that regard, I don't believe in rapid deployment forces. I don't want an 82nd, I'll probably get a lot of hate mail for this. A lot of great folks in the 82nd Airborne, 101st. I don't want quick reaction forces like that. Yeah. I don't want them because that enables a POTUS to go strike very quickly without really thinking it through. And at the end of the day, is there anything that really happens worldwide that we have to figure out? We have to take action within 72 hours? Really? Because what I would argue is when you quickly do something like that, now you mire yourself in conflicts that are that you can't pull back out of. You really didn't resolve anything. And so, anyhow, this is just a problem for me.
No, it is. And, the thing is, there's an apparatus in place for reacting to things in 72 hours. It's called special forces.
Exactly.
Because we run on presidential directives. He sends, people always ask, hey, which conflicts did you go to? I'm like, I lost count. Because we could deploy in 12 hours, 6 hours, we've gone. I was in Zamboanga in the Philippines 24 hours after 9/11. Like, boom, setting up a base. And that's what special forces is for, among other things: direct action, FID, or foreign internal defense, and everything. So when they want to send these big units, like the conventional CENTCOM units, or Central Command for those that don't know, they want us to get mired in it. People like Lindsey Graham, they want us in this war because Afghanistan got shut down because, in my opinion, Biden made a deal with the Chinese to give all of those semi-precious minerals to China, who is now being, and since before August 15th of 2022, is being chaperoned around their dam sites and their semi-precious mineral mining sites around Afghanistan by the Pakistani Taliban. But I know they had to shut down Afghanistan because it had gone on too long. So I think their answer was Ukraine. And by they, I mean the people that make an ATM machine out of war.
Sure.
Well, Ukraine's not working out.
And this is this block you're talking about. Yep. And, I might give you just a story from the past. This goes back to 9/11. I had an uncle. He was in air defense. He got out, worked for Martin Marietta. And after, when the towers came down and they're watching this on the TV, he said he could not believe it. And I won't say what location he was in, but a number of folks, higher level folks there, started cheering and were excited. And I asked, what do you mean? He said he knew at that point we're going to war, and that this is going to make, be incredibly profitable. And it just made him so sick and nauseated.
That's disgusting, yeah.
But this talks to that massive power block, that we have this incredibly powerful military. But what is it being used for? And is it being, constitutionally, this is why the Founding Fathers did not provide for a funded, standing, professional army.
That's right. That's
only
right.
A Navy.
Good point.
Only a Navy, because what does a Navy do? Well, what does an Army do that the Navy cannot do?
Right.
And that boots on the ground, occupy foreign nations and stay as an occupation force. Navy can't do that. Navy secures your economy, secures your right to passage on the seas. But when you have, and you mentioned the Greatest Generation, you remember, you mentioned World War II. Was that a professional army? Absolutely not. The last war that we decisively won, and they were not professionals. And they did it far shorter than how long we occupied Afghanistan and Iraq.
Totally.
And they wrapped it up. And these were plumbers and carpenters and farmers. And so, there's a lot that could be debated with having a...
No, this is good. I mean, look, I'm so glad to hear this. And, I'm glad we're the same generation. We were in the Army at the same time. So it's really interesting that we have the same perspective because we experienced it. There's so many people sitting on the sidelines. And look, I don't care if people join the military or not. That's their choice. That's why America is great. Right. And I'll never shame people for not joining the military. But what I will say is, don't talk about what's going on in the military unless you've been in it. Or I don't care about their opinion unless they've worn the uniform. When they're talking about, I care about their opinion, but I don't care about their opinion on what actually occurs in war, unless they've been a war correspondent or in uniform.
Yeah, and they have to take an appetite suppressant and realize what they don't know. It just drives me.
That's really well said.
I lost my hair from all these folks that talk about military strategy. They'll see a Humvee and call it a tank. It's like, please stop. You
lost your hair because you didn't take collagen.
I'm going to take collagen immediately.
It's going to come back.
When I come back, huge head of hair.
Honestly, I'm already planning mine too, because I won't show you the top of my head, but I'll be shaved down pretty soon. But you're right, and when I see people beating the drumbeat for war, I have a 13-year-old, and I told him, I said, don't join the military. I thought maybe after Trump got in, now's the time. It's not the time yet, because I think, and you touch on a great point. If if something is big and powerful and effective, someone's going to use it. And like I said, Iraq, Afghanistan shuts down. Ukraine almost 6 months to the day after August 15th. And it was Tucker Carlson then saying, why? They're of no strategic value to the U.S. They're not allies. And then Ukraine didn't quite work out the way they'd hoped. That was supposed to be a long, forever war. And even before Trump came in, it was just not working out.
Right.
And so then they need to replace that. And Iran's the perfect thing. And another thing that no one seems to be talking about, maybe a few people, why the hell is Iran and China and Russia not helping Iran?
Why is Russia and China not helping them?
They're their closest allies.
Well,
Iran's a big provider of oil.
Yeah, China has the Belt and Road Initiative. They just agreed upon a big railway between them. I don't know if it's the type of railway, but
with Iran.
With Iran, I think.
Oh yeah, it goes right through Afghanistan. Oh, you know where else it's supposed to go? Right through the Gaza Strip eventually.
Yeah, I think I think China. So I've done kung fu since college. I love Chinese kung fu.
Someone said, maybe they're reading. Sorry, I got to put this up. Sorry to cut you off. Someone you mentioned the kung fu, and someone had said Kung Fu Bill in the there we go. Is that on your website?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know, but I don't know Malo. I don't believe.
Hey Malo, go ahead.
But the wonderful thing about the Chinese culture is they have a long view, and you see that in the Chinese martial arts, that the training to be strong. It's over your lifetime. It's not just to quickly get a belt within 2 years and no, it's a lifelong discipline to get stronger through the duration. But I think China is sitting back to wisely watch and see how this plays out between us and Iran. They're not racing to failure. There's no sense in rushing to failure. I think Russia may be on the ropes. They have all they can handle with Ukraine. They don't want to engage in yet another major theater of war that could be incredibly damaging. So I think they're wisely.
Well, and China won't let them. They're the chief supplier of oil and gas to China.
Exactly. And so this is why I think we don't see them entering into the fray just yet. And maybe we won't at all. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way this one's playing out. I mean, there's so many. And look, listeners, and let's take some comments really quick, Bill. I know it's getting late. I've kept you on way over the time I promised you.
I'm an Army guy. I can go all night. I'm at your disposal.
I know you can, and I'm not willing to abuse that. So plus I gotta take care of my son soon. He's been more than patient, but he's a great kid too. By the way, my son, he knows geopolitics like it's no one's business. We were riding in the car the other day, and Naomi was, and for those that know, Naomi Wolf is my wife, and she knows a lot about history from her study of literature at Oxford. But she was asking him things like, why did France invade Russia? And he's just rattling it off. He's 13. I'm like, damn. Like, I felt like the dumbest guy in the car. I'm like, because I forgot all that stuff, and some of the stuff I didn't even know. And so, and we also, like you, we actually have a place in the Hudson Valley. We call it Liberty Place. It's this massive house. We got it for a steal. The guy is an ex-cop. His mom had died. He was selling the house, and he'd seen Naomi's work on Steve Bannon and everything. Way below market. He gave it to us. It's like 5.5 acres. We've had several events up there, but the basement I've cordoned off for books. And what I do is every time I go anywhere, I focus on textbooks and dictionaries.
Yes.
And I feel like a dummy because I got this United States history textbook, and I get to the back. I'm like, why do they only have 47 states? Oh, because it's that old.
Yeah.
And I get the dictionaries because they change definitions.
They do, and you'll find even novels, you'll find new novels, say in Barnes and Noble. They'll republish now, say War and Peace. But if you compared it with an earlier edition of War and Peace,
No.
you'll find that they have edited things out. And this
No
is
way.
and this is happening in a number of novels that things weren't quite PC in the earlier editions, the original editions, and so they're editing that out.
I
And
bet
this
they
is
hit Huckleberry Finn, didn't they?
absolutely well, and so I don't have a list of all of the books where this is currently happening, but we're getting to a point where you won't even be able to go to say it's no use going to a new bookstore buying new copies of books of novels because unless you have the ability to scan it and compare it against the old, you won't even know what they edited out, and you get a sanitized version. So
That's amazing.
I go everywhere and I buy old books.
God, man, we are peas in a pod because like that's like my number one thing. Like my daughter, who's 28, she knows on my birthday I want one thing. I want an old book.
Yep.
It's got to be, for me it's nonfiction, mainly textbooks and everything like that. But I want an old book. And then my neighbor next door, and I'm in Salem. This is super woke town, but like super woke town. And we won't get to them tonight. But our protests over here is nice people and everything. Honestly, it's like the protests they have every weekend. There is nothing new. And one guy had he had a rubber chicken in a taco shell. And so I went in, I'm asking questions. I said, so what's with the chicken? And he goes on to explain this to me for a long time. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, well, and then he asked me, he's like, hey, you shut the camera off. And I said, sure. And I'm an honest guy. Like if they ask me and I say, sure, I'm going to shut it off.
Yep.
And he said, I said, he's like, yeah, you asked what I'm doing here earlier. I said, well, yeah, And he's like, honestly, what the hell else am I going to do on a Saturday? And he goes, and he's like in his 80s, and he goes, and he's like, Brian, look at all the chicks. and it's all people his age. So he's out there trolling for women. I was like, okay, well I can. What's that?
With the rubber chicken.
Oh no, he's got some mojo going on, man, because this dude was pulling him. But we do see the same people at all the protests, and so like out here in Massachusetts, like it's mainly retirees, like on the coastal areas because they got the money to live here, right. And then like there's never Gen X, and I'm guessing you're Gen X, and it's like it's usually millennials, and I gotta say, and I haven't posted it yet, there was one person who actually, I didn't agree with her, but she actually could make articulate points, and that was like this 22-year-old Palestinian. And she knew her history, and she actually told me, she's like, I said, where do you get your news? And she's like, well, we don't trust New York Times anymore because they have been caught lying too much. And I said, but you're with the Democratic Party. She's like, no, like we can't trust them either. I've realized it's like, wow. Professional wrestling. This is a young Palestinian wow. At a NoKings rally, and I disagreed with her on the Palestinian issue that we were talking about, but I was listening to her, and I told her, I said, I don't really agree with you, but you're making some great points, and you have the sources to back them, and I hope you can spread that around, because even though I don't agree with you, we're going to have less riots and less war if people are as knowledgeable as you.
Exactly. Well, that's encouraging.
Is very encouraging, and I'll share with you offline the video. But look, we're gonna have to do a to be continue because it's getting late, and you probably one of the best conversations I've had on this show, and all due respect to all my other guests.
And now your integrity is in question, but you seem like a great guy, so I've really enjoyed it tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. Let's get you on again more regularly. Let me, before you go, can we just take do you got time for a few comments? Because people are blowing up the chat here. So, okay, cool. All right. So more a guide, then he's asking about your book you're writing.
Yeah. So it really is explaining the essence of leadership, like the blocking and tackling things. there are many theoretical leadership books out there. This one is, I want one where you can just open it up. You see, I want to deal with difficult conversations, say with someone I have to maybe fire, or you can go right to that section and read the principles involved with that, how to go about it, etc. How do you start, establish your team? How do you establish a great environment with your team? Bam, turn right to that chapter. How do you lead up, lead your boss? A very important thing. You have to understand how to do that. There are times when your boss is a really bad leader, but part of being a good leader is to follow their lead, to be within reason, loyal, and work well for them. But sometimes you have to lead your boss. Well, bam, you go right to that section. And so that's so management's part of that. But it's the leadership blocking the major muscle movements of leadership.
That is well said, man. This, by the way, while you're talking and taking a few of these, just going to throw your Twitter on there. Make sure everyone follows Unbowed Paladin, who's Bill. And let me put that on the screen. Sorry. If you self-produce, Bill, you know what I'm going through right now.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So there is his Twitter. So, all right. Next one. This is actually really good. And this was posted right before you mentioned it, so I'm very impressed. My Malo Path, who's new, I think, welcome to the show. And by the way, came in, who was just in that comment, came in 666. Great person. He's been here for quite a few episodes. Malo Path says, the first rally was just testing the water, a thought experiment, if you will, designed to determine how many people would turn out for what would seem to be a strong stance based on emotion. What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
That's exactly right. And that's what I meant by a probing attack. Just using a military term, testing the water, or a probing attack to see how strong the enemy was, to get a reaction. Malo Path, I think you're exactly right. This is my sentiment exactly. So I think the next one, 17 July, this has a racial theme. And so I think they're going to gauge to see how much turnout they'll have with that theme. They may have an LGBTQ kind of theme next. I don't know. But we'll take I think that they're going to test the different hot topics, the current hot topics.
That's interesting. Using these protests to feel it out. What's going to, and also, it's also conditioning people to turn out for elections.
It exactly is. And then they build a database of people who have signed up, RSVP'd. Right. Now they have this database. They can send them what I would call propaganda, messaging, and to keep encouraging it and build this upswell of protesters for the big campaign that they have planned. And I don't know what that is yet, but I'm looking for it, and I expect it, and I think it's out there. They've got a far sinister major campaign plan. There's a phase coming up. They're taking all the data from these initial thought experiments, as Malo calls it, to then build and refine and tweak what that major attack is going to be in the future.
Good point. And I agree. And I think the attack is happening now. They're going after local precinct type stuff. That Palestinian girl was telling me there's so many unopposed local elections.
And so here, like to Chris Cross's comment here, I don't think the protest failed, because it did look flaccid. It did look like, wow, okay, so what did this achieve? But it only fails if you know what they were trying to do with it. If they were trying to gain data and sense, support, then they got great data. They got great feedback. And their intent wasn't to burn the place down or have enormous crowd and stop traffic. So I think the only way we can know whether they had success or failure was if we know what their intentions were for the protest. I could be wrong. That's a good point. I'm willing to be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we got to explore it all. And, Chris Cross, I think it's important you say that, because they're out there saying it was a great success, but really no one knows what it was about. So it's important that you remind people that there were a bit of, I will say this, and it's great. Naomi's a great resource if you really want to understand the left mindset, because guys like us, we go deep, we're analyzing, we're, We are like unrestricted warfare authors from the Chinese Communist Party. Like everyone's an enemy combatant, and they are, whether they know it or not. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But she also brings in the whole Occam's razor type thing. She's like, "Honey, they're not going to have big turnout because it's raining." And I was like, "Good point."
Lord William of Ockham, great philosopher, great principle.
Honestly, I never knew the guy's full name. It's just a criminal justice term from my master's studies.
Yeah.
And so, Occam. So he was actually William Ockham.
William of Ockham. So Ockham was where he's from, and so they called it Occam's razor.
So is Ockham like a really boring place?
It may
I don't know if you get the joke. The most obvious, So, anyways, and then this. So Eloy Galvan is saying, "I live in the southernmost part of Texas. My little town, Harlingen, had it, but no one showed up." Yeah, I'll say this, if I could take this one, Bill. What they also did on the NoKings.org is every planned protest was put on that map. But everyone can plan a protest on that site. So if you planned a protest, even if you hadn't even reached out to anyone, it went on the map. And it was an overwhelming map. Like, it was scary, and it's like, that was kind of the trick there, to get people discouraged.
And here's an interesting thing, and this may be of encouragement to people watching, is it's easy to be discouraged and to be pessimistic. And I don't know who to attribute this to, but someone recently said, some scientists, it may even be the author of Dilbert, Scott Adams, I believe.
He's pretty active. Yeah, he's pretty active on social media.
But someone said that humans don't do well with big numbers. They just cannot conceptualize big numbers well. And so when we looked at a map and it's small on your screen like this and it's full of dots, what I do is I say, well, this could look overwhelming. It could look like all of the nation is just pockmarked with protests. But let's look at its scale. If you were to blow that up to half scale, to a quarter scale, you couldn't even see the little dots. They'd be so small. So even though in the moment we're like little ants in the ant colony and we look around and say, wow, there's 1,000 people. In the scheme of things, these 1,000 people in the little pinprick town where you're at versus 300 and some million people here in the United States, it really was very insignificant in that regard. And so there's no reason to feel incredibly threatened or pessimistic. We should have hope at all times. Just realize and try to objectively see the threat that this represents and meet that threat, but not overcompensate by losing our sanity.
It's interesting you say that, because my brother was in the Marine Corps and for Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and right before I entered the military, and he was telling me like he ended up, he would ride along a lot when they were doing a big offensive, and as you know, the offensives there ended with people surrendering in thousands. The Republican guards, like some of them fought, but really they would just surrender. And I always thought that was weird that so many soldiers of the Iraqi army surrendered. But he told me what he witnessed, and one of the actual psyops, not like the conspiracy theory type psyops, like the actual, what they actually did on a lot of these is they would overdub the sound of helicopters. Mm-hmm. So it sounded like 2,000 helicopters, and blasted on those same speakers like you saw down in Noriega's thing when they surrounded his house. And then they'd have evil laughter echoing from those helicopters and babies crying echoing from those helicopters. And so you have this nightmare coming over the horizon. And he said on one of those things he went on, they come over the mound, or the mountain, the dune, whatever it is over there, and it was just an ocean of white flags.
Yeah.
Because they could hear this coming for about a mile, 2 miles, and they're like, screw this. Like, we've been calling him the Great Satan. They are the Great Satan. Here comes Satan. We're giving up.
Yep.
And so when people are faced with, as you said, that's really astute observation, these overwhelming numbers, they do tend to give up or curl up in a ball. Like, it's too big, I can't handle it.
Exactly.
Good point. All right, let me take a few more comments. I think we got to call it a night. Let me see. And this, I hate calling a night, but unfortunately I have to. And by the way, Cayman666, Eloy Galvin, Crisscross, all of you, thank you for showing up. I'm just kind of scrolling through here, see if there's anyone new on here. And by the way, John Gibson, gratis. He just liked it. Great. Someone said Black's Law Dictionary. Yes, great. Oh, we should check Black's Law to see how much that has changed. And what I do, Bill, is I put like Merriam-Webster.com into like the Wayback Machine, and you can see it change, like
Right.
in near real time. So here we go. I'm going to leave it. This is a good one. This compliment to you, Bill. Bring Bill back to elaborate on his experience in Iraq and high command objectives. Would you be willing to do that, Bill?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'd love to talk about
Let's
that.
do it. And what I want to do when you come back on is I want to bring Brandon Weichart on. He's my normal. He's a geopolitical analyst. I'll send you his information. Brandon.
Yep.
Do you know him?
Yep. We've exchanged tweets here and there.
Oh, great. Yeah. So get them all, because it'd be great to have. And I saw you worked with Border Patrol too. So might have to have like a Sunday roundtable or something like that. I think would be fun.
Absolutely.
All right, so Bill, guys, we will go deeper into this, and definitely there it is. You can follow Bill right there on X, and I will put all of his stuff up in the description. And just so you know, I didn't know who Bill was a week ago. He probably didn't know who I was, and he just did so much great work on just his posts. I was like, dude, you got to. Would I reach out to you on a DM, right?
Absolutely. And
yeah,
I did know who you were because I've listened to you before and thought,
thank you.
A very thoughtful individual where you really think through the issues very lucidly. I love hearing your wife dissects issues, the two of you together. It's quality, like energy for the brain. It's like massaging your brain with thoughts. And so this is what I love about X is instead of just garbage programming, I can really try to find selectively incredible minds out there. And the synthesis of hearing other people talk and their take on things, it's indispensable. It's just an incredible thing. We're blessed to have X.
Well, and Bill, we're blessed to have found you because this has been an incredible conversation. And thank you for that really gracious compliment. I'm lucky to have Naomi in my life and everyone in my life. And that's how we talk all day long. So we just turned on the camera one day. But thanks for tuning in for that. But
absolutely.
Bill, I am going to do what I normally do, and I'm going to give you the last words. So let me take this down. And what would you like to leave the audience with, and what would your marching orders going forward be when it comes to dealing with competing propaganda, upcoming conflicts, and even conflicts in their area? What advice would you give to any soldier, like how to navigate this?
I think the most apropos thing is the reason why I'm involved in this and concerned about this. I joined the military because I wanted to defend the nation. This is truly why I joined. And that desire has never faded. So I'm now getting into and counter trafficking, especially child trafficking. I want to employ all of my capabilities and skills in pursuing that. But that said, when I look at the nation and what we're up against and what we're fighting, I think it's so important not to demonize. And I tell myself this all the time. All those protesters, so many of them, I would love to just sit down and have coffee with them and get to know them and just talk with them and try to reason with them. What I try to do is be very cognizant of the mental models that I use and that I look through these eyeballs with, because the mental model that you use to look at the world can be helpful or it can be very damaging, unhelpful, and quite frankly, wrong. And so I realize that some of those folks are true believers and they despise what I hold dear and they want to burn things down. And I would call that evil. I may not be able to reach them. They may be unreachable in that regard. But so many of them in these protests, for sure, they don't quite understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they haven't really talked with someone, a conservative, or just reason through with that. So I don't want to look at them as the enemy. I look at them as folks that I have pity on. I pray for them. I feel sadness for them because we live in a wonderful nation. It is an incredible, wonderful nation. You know this. You've been around the world. I love this nation. But if I look at them as enemy and we have to develop tactics and techniques to defeat them, I'm not going to drive my car past them and fly them the bird and scream back and yell at them and counter protest. That's not helpful, in my opinion. What would be helpful is on X. Maybe I can talk to folks. Maybe I can cut a video that someone will hear and they don't agree at first, but they hear it and they're like, wow, that's compelling. Let me listen to that again. So it's really just an encouragement to be reflective of the mental models we use, because it is a very we have an incredible foe in this nation right now. But we're not going to defeat it by being equally violent, equally implacable, equally steadfast in, you are my enemy and you must be defeated. No, let's recruit you to the goodness of America. Let's recruit you so that you can have a wonderful life for you and your children, and realize that the demons that you've been told that we are, it's not true. And so, I don't know, that was probably a shock.
No, that was
all over the map.
It's fantastic, man. It's just like, we got to talk to each other more, plain and simple. Got to get out there like you did. And you're right, they're all Americans. And I agree. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to take away from that, but that was perfect. So, Bill, I will put all of your stuff up in the definition. I will tweet that out, and let's stick around backstage when I end the show. Would love to get you on, and everyone really liked having you. And those are encouraging words and I think it's a good time too, because I think left, right, whatever you want to call them, everyone's starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, we're all being used the same way.
Absolutely.
And it's time for Americans to take back this country, not a party and not an ideal, but Americans. So, Bill, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. This was fantastic. And yeah, thanks. And I will make sure people know how to find you. But do go, if you're on X, definitely go to, sorry, lost the screen, Unbowed Paladin. So right there. Let me put that back up so people see it. Make sure you follow Bill. Send him a message. He definitely responds. I know that firsthand. And it's fantastic. So, Bill, thanks again. And everyone else, this has been Brian O'Shea. And Bill, because I don't think he gave me permission to use his last name yet. He's been great. He will definitely be back, and we're looking forward to it. So thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much, everyone that joined us. Please retweet this, share it, clip it, quote it, whatever you want to do. Get the word out. And do me a favor, and do Bill a favor. Tomorrow, if you see someone with a sign or a rainbow flag, go talk to them. What's the worst that could happen? So have a great night. Okay, and everyone, we'll see you next time. It's been Brian O'Shea with Investigate Everything. Thank you so much.